to our own children in public schools, not because the damage it will do for white folk. It's the power that it will instill in you. If you just look at the law, they wouldn't allow us to read. Y'all understand that, right? It was literally against the law. White folk could do any and everything to us as enslaved Africans. They could kill us. They could mutilate us. They could rape our mamas. But what they would not allow them to do was teach their enslaved Africans how to read. That's how powerful the knowledge is. And so we got to put that in some context. These are laws that were on the books. You look at the 13th Amendment right now. 13th Amendment was supposed to do what? Abolish slavery, except for being convicted of a crime. So it's still on the books. That's our work. That's your work. And so I want to close. Because once you know your people, once you understand our problems, and you internalize your own power, you gotta show up. You gotta show up. And my mom, let me tell you a little story, and I'm gonna close on this. My mom grew up in Chicago in a housing project called Racine Court. She graduated from Morgan Park High School at 16 years old, and she started and was going to college, and the welfare people came and said, you got skills. You're gonna have to quit school and help with your younger siblings. So she had to leave school and start working. And so she worked, she put herself through school, she ultimately graduates, becomes a teacher, lives a great life as a Chicago educator, and then she gets to move to Atlanta in retirement. And so when she comes to Atlanta, she becomes a thespian. Y'all know what a thespian is? Yeah, she started acting at 78 years old. I mean, that's what we do as black people. We just reinvent ourselves, right? 78. She said she becomes an actress and starts acting in these plays. And so the very first play, she calls me up and she says, hey, I got the tickets for the play and I need you to come. Not far from here, they do it at this theater, similar to this, the Salvation Army Theater, and they say, I got, the tickets, get your ticket. I said, okay, all right, Ma. Lo and behold, I got busy, I got distracted, I didn't get my ticket. My mom calls the next day. She says, son, did you get your tickets? I said, Mom, man, my fault, straight forgot, I'm gonna get my ticket. She's like, okay. She was a little short. She's like, okay. Next day she calls. Son, did you get your tickets? I said, man, I forgot, Mom, I'm sorry. Click. Now when your mama hang up on you, you got problems. And I was about to blame Jana, because that's how we work. You get to blame your spouse for everything, But then she calls back on the fourth day. And she says, I paid for your tickets. Now all I need you to do is show up. Y'all's tickets have been paid for. We just need y'all to show up.
So we show up every Saturday, 297 consecutive Saturdays.
297.
Yeah.
297. 297 because our tickets have been paid for. Who paid for your ticket?
My grandmother, my daddy, my mama. I'm sure my great-grandmother, who I knew on my dad's side. I'm sure all of you also, because as I think forward, somebody was like, I can't believe it's 297. And I was like, that's because y'all show up every Saturday. We would talk to each other. I really believe we would be talking to each other anyway.
Sure.
This is because people show up every Saturday. So
Mm,
let me just say good morning to you. Thank you.
good
Hello.
morning. Good
Uh,
morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good everything. Morning, afternoon, evening. People from
yes,
all
that's right.
over.
That's right. That's right. Last week when we were going at 5 a.m., the people in Ghana and England were happy because it was
Yeah, exactly.
like, oh, it's 10 o'clock. Oh, we're good. Uh,
Oh my goodness. These
so
electronic devices.
um, Maoli Davis,
Yes.
the liberation lawyer, beautiful human
Perfect.
being. Yes.
Perfectly described.
What is this event?
That
Really?
is the good brother, as you said perfectly. That's Mauli Davis. My brother, he is a principal and a co-founder of the Davis Bozeman law firm here in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a liberation warrior, as you heard, with Chicago roots. We've known each other now for close to 35 years. We met in Philly. He came out of the Navy, went to law school, and Mauli and his comrades are at the living, beating heart of so much work here in Atlanta and across the country and around the world. In fact, just before we left last night for the end of the second day of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, that's why I'm here for the conference. In fact, Mauli is the current head of the Georgia chapters, but he is the incoming president-elect for NCPL. We were standing there, I was talking with him and another of our legendary freedom fighter, warrior attorneys, Roger Wareham. And they were talking about coming back from South Africa the second week of September 2001 for something called the World Conference Against Racism. Conrad World, Mashariki Jawans. So many people were there. And remember, that's that conference where Colin Powell had indicated that he wanted to go. Condoleezza Rice was against it, and neither one of them ended up going. And then the United States delegation pulled out because they voted at that time to support the Palestinian struggle. And of course, you can't do that on Massa's dime. So them Negroes got out of there. United States left. And Roger was saying, yeah, we got back maybe 2 days before September the 11th, 2001. Because remember, very few people actually outside these circles like this, these Pan-African, these nationalist circles, remember that the talk at that time, before those planes hit, and in Pennsylvania and in New York and in DC, the talk was the United States turning its back on the world at the World Conference Against Racism. But after September the 11th, 2001, it's like that conference never happened. So we were sitting there talking. Mauli was there, Roger was there. There's a lot of people in the room who had been at that. I'm just saying Mauli is he's in our generation. He's in that bridge generation between all those great elders and
What's
kids
the
who come.
what's the
Yeah.
company? Let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, as you mentioned, September 11th. We we always seem to be marching towards something, and then something happens, and then we have to abandon it for the times. Like, because I remember sitting at the Daily News, and there was this drumbeat of Giuliani. Giuliani was about to be ousted. Like,
Yes.
New York
Yes.
turning against him. He brought this lady into Gracie Mansion, and every headline, every newspaper was trashing him. September 11th happens, and then overnight he becomes America's mayor. And I'm
How
like,
about that?
I said, so we just gonna ignore all the stuff that just happened the last 2 years. We just not gonna. October 7th, every single day, Jewish people were in the street. Israelis were in the streets fighting against Netanyahu, calling for his ouster, calling for him. Horrible, horrible person.
That's right.
7th happens, the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't even talk about the latest iteration here, but you're reminding us, something that Mavali is saying. We have to keep showing up in the face of it. Maybe we have to turn down the volume a little bit, but we got to still be organizing and working, because there'll come a time when we can come back in. But I was also thinking next week I think we're celebrating the birthday of Pauli Murray, a person that we've talked about. And I'm thinking about,
Yes.
in a world that's lawless, in a world where everybody is now very clear that people can do whatever they want when they're in positions of power. They can do whatever they want. What is a law when you can snatch people who are here legally up off the streets with no recourse, with no, there's no what rule of law anywhere, right
That's
now.
right.
But there are courts that are every day still showing up, and it's slow, but it's happening. How do you have a discussion, Dr. Carr, about our commitment to the law when it seems like the law does what it wants when it wants?
Well, you know, the beautiful thing about that, Professor Hunter, is that it's been my experience that those who are the clearest about not only the hypocrisy, but the fundamental anti-African, anti-human, ultimately, nature of the law are the best lawyers. So not only is hope not lost, struggle is what gives hope meaning in the law, because we understand that this is a criminal enterprise. And, you know, I say that often, and I'm very comfortable with it. We were joking about that last night. Baba Akinyele Umoja, who will be speaking tonight at the closing banquet for NCPL, we were laughing. We were standing in the hallway laughing about that. People understand. Akinyele, you talked to him before. Akinyele is the brother who wrote the book "We Will Shoot Back" about all them armed Negroes in Mississippi. Well, you know, so everybody watched the documentaries, think we just peacefully marching down the middle of the road, and somehow, you know, there was Negroes in the bushes with rifles. Like if the Klan shoots somebody today, we killing everything on the other side of the highway. So anytime y'all watch them documentaries, everybody's singing and marching. And why aren't they attacking? They're not attacking because we will shoot back. So we were out there laughing. We're very clear about the fact that the law is not only not our friend, it is our open enemy. And so these are warrior attorneys I'm talking about now. These are the people who fight the police in the street and then go in the courtroom and fight. And when they try to take their law license, they go to court and sue the people who try to take the license. See, when you fight back, they back up off you. You understand? These aren't the Negroes who are pleading to be admitted to the highest award system in the bar and trying to figure out how to be groomed for the judgeship. And some of them end up being judges, but it's not because they begged. It's because they didn't beg. See, those are Negroes you got to watch. You know what I'm saying?
Let me ask you, there was a point in my tenure, of teaching journalism that I realized I don't know what I'm teaching because it doesn't exist. What I'm preparing these young people for doesn't exist anymore. So I had to shift, I had to shift what I was teaching, and I decided I was going to teach them life, which was way more valuable in my estimation. And if journalism ever came back, they would have the skills, the life skills, the people skills to navigate it. As a law teacher, maybe people don't, in addition to you teaching Africana studies at Howard University, you also teach law, have a law. Have you had to shift teaching law or what? Because it's through an Africana framework.
Yes.
It always is constant for you.
That's a great question. I haven't had to shift at all. If anything, it's an affirmation of what we understand. I'm gonna show you a picture. You might recognize this. You see that? You recognize this sister right here? You know her?
Of course I know Angie Porter.
Yes, exactly. Well, yesterday we had a conversation, and this is the NCBL booklet. We had a conversation yesterday. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see here. Yes, Remembering Our Ways of Knowing, a historic conversation on Africana legal studies. We were the luncheon keynotes. So it's just she and I conversation with two students, and I was very happy about that because one of the students, Madupe Ajanaku, is my student at Howard, and she's a product of this community down here. Shout out to Madupe and her mother, Elisa, and the community around Quilombo. Quilombo is celebrating its 20th anniversary. In fact, they got a big event down here on the 20th of November. I wish I could be here. They're going to screen the documentary talking about their 20th anniversary, and I'll talk more about that later. But we were in conversation about this very thing. And of course, as Angie has taken that Africana Studies conceptual categories framework and applied it to the law, we were talking about how that works. And she was walking people through it. And she says, in a social structure rendering, we talk about law. But in Africana studies framework, in a governance formation, we don't use the word law, because we should be very clear about what law is. She said we can talk about protocol. Protocol is a very different thing. And so, it's a room full of lawyers and law professors. Justin Hansford was down here, who runs the Thurgood Marshall Center. He's here at Howard, and my man Lucius Outlaw III, who had a very interesting panel about RICO and hip hop, because we are in Atlanta. So they were talking about the RICO charges and all this, and how these are practicing lawyers as well. Lou's been practicing. He was a federal prosecutor for a while. So he's talking about how now every here in the state of Georgia, for example, they slap a RICO charge on everything else. Why? And he said this has terrible implications. He said, I've been practicing defense law and I was a prosecutor. He said, but I've been dealing with RICO for 20 years. And I still am learning about RICO, because I understand it's so flexible. They put it in place for the mob, ostensibly, for the mafia. And now they basically going to try to say anything you do is a criminal conspiracy. He said, I will certainly never defend Sean Combs. But the reason the RICO charge failed is because it was just him. Bad Boy was part of a. No, now y'all charge everybody with a RICO charge. And he said, and now they talking about Black Lives Matter. They're gonna probably try to slap a RICO charge on them. Everything's racketeer influence, criminal organization. But anyway, I'm saying all that as a backdrop to this. When you go to court, you see the jury, and you're in the middle of that word war and influence war. You're trying to pick a jury, they talked about voir dire yesterday as well. How do you pick a jury? This kind of thing. This is intellectual warfare, and it's dealing with real life people. And when we talk about the law, part of the challenge, and this is what Angie and I were talking about yesterday, is that if you enter that space thinking that you are somehow subordinate to law, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you walk in there saying, we have a protocol, the only reason I'm in here using this tool is it's a means to an end. I don't have any respect for this. That is, my respect for this is like your respect for it. I know you playing a game. Now I'm playing one too. It shifts the energy and yeah. Now get these 12 people in there. I love how Alton Maddox, we talked about him yesterday, the ancestor, would say, he said, you just put 12 in the box. You put 12 in the box. I'm going to tell my story. You tell your story, and we'll see who comes out on the other end. So he was so effective in New York that eventually they took his law license. And they could never explain why. Because I'm beating y'all. Y'all don't understand. I understand what this is. Y'all like, oh, look at equal justice under law. Man, go to hell. Put 12 in the box. And then you tell your story, I tell my story. We see who gets out of here. I mean, you have to, there's a certain, as far as I'm concerned, contempt for any system that has contempt for you. Why are you respecting a system that has clearly said it's against you? So when I'm in class with students, my primary objective, my only objective, is for us to use our intelligence to really ask questions of any legal training, let's think about this. And if you have a certain feeling and predisposition toward it, you should go with that feeling. Now, you shouldn't go with that feeling uninformed. Sorry, the Knarrative starring Stephen A. Smith. And I heard y'all yesterday. It was hilarious. I was laughing. But if you go into with just a feeling, you're in trouble, because you only have feelings. You still got to master the craft, which is why, as I hear you talk about teaching your students life instead of journalism, it's like, yeah, you'll be a better journalist. So whatever the form takes, you can learn how to hit the key on that machine, or you can learn how to cut and paste it. But what I'm helping you understand is you came in this room with some feelings, with some experiences, and they are utterly legitimate. Let me share with you my feelings, my experiences. And from that foundation, we'll interrogate any shift in appearance that comes along, and you're going to be a better storyteller for it. You're going to be a better asker of questions. You'll be able to draw out even more from the people you interview. You'll be able to make even more connections. The minute you understand that all those things they're throwing at you aren't designed for you to tell your story, but to fit your story to their story. So you teach in life. It's the same thing in any subject area, including the law. Yeah. And it makes them master it too better, I think, because once you take away the mystique, how do you file a 1983 claim? You're filing a civil rights claim, not because you have so much respect for the federal statute, because you understand you've entered this space to fight a war, and you need to have this skill. Do not displace how you feel about this. I think that's where we get in trouble.
And for those of you who are not lawyers, you can show up for jury duty.
How about number one?
You could be one of the 12 in the box, as we talk about voting being number 8, maybe in a 10-step power play. It's like the least you could do is show up for your community so that they can have a jury of their peers.
That's exactly right. That's exactly, and it's so funny. It's so interesting you say that, Prof, because yesterday afternoon, Mowley led the workshop entitled Selecting Justice Fighters, Conducting Voir dire in 1983 Cases. In other words, how do you ask the questions to get the jury you need to get that? Is exactly right. But if you ain't showed up with jury duty, you just tie Mowley's hands behind his back. I'm looking in the jury pool. I'm like, where are y'all at? Oh man, I ain't gonna jury duty. Now, what? I'm trying to get disclaimer. I'm trying to get some justice, but the jury's gonna be the issue. The jury is going to be the issue. And when you've mastered legal technique and you know the statute and you know how to apply it and you know the rules of evidence and then you don't make mistakes as a lawyer. And if you don't make mistakes as a lawyer, then you rob your opposition of the ability to have your victory overturned on appeal on technical reasons. But you gotta master your craft so that you can actually go about the business of freeing up people to do theirs. Nobody's expecting a juror to be a lawyer. In other words, and this is very interesting because a prosecutor will work hard to get rid of anybody on a jury who they think could sway everybody else. When's the last time you served on a jury?
I get called every year now because I show up, so they keep calling, but I always get dismissed.
Exactly. They don't want you in the jury pool.
I'm listening. I'm like, okay, I don't have any bumper stickers. All right, let me be quiet about it. Then they get to what do you do? Which also kind of leads to our literacy and our reading and knowing. There was a clip of Nick Fuentes. What if there was some kind of literacy around voting? If like he said, Democrats will win every time because most of the people who vote Democrat are. But it does speak to the more majority. We don't want everyone to vote, so our literacy is our superpower, our ability to know things, our ability to read and know and disseminate and critically think. Yeah, they don't want a jury full of people that know things, because then you're going to be like, well, wait, church finger, hold up. But what about? Hold up.
Exactly.
Now. But what about? We need to know what about people. Yeah, they don't sit me, but I do show up. I show up.
Of course. And you ain't got to worry about being picked, especially for the big stuff. They don't want nobody with a college degree. They don't want anybody went to law school or anyone a professor. No, they don't want any of those people. And isn't it ironic as we sit here this morning and had this conversation that the very thing that would disqualify you now is the thing they said would qualify you during Jim and Jane Crow, a literacy test, which means it was never about literacy. In fact, these are the most illiterate people in the Confederacy that existed. It wasn't about reading and writing. It's about keeping you out. And then you master reading and writing. Now that's a reason to keep you out. In other words, it's about keeping you out. This is why, it's just, I hadn't thought about it. It's very ironic. The very thing you said. It's like.
Can we spend 1 second on Mawuli's mom? Can we just 1 minute on Mrs. Davis? Yeah. I love that she decided at 78 she was going to do something else, because again, not only is the fight never ending and we find joy in the midst of it, but your life, please always try to do something and reinvent and never give up on yourself. I love that she did that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about it is, like I said, I've known Mally a long time. Beautiful family. I heard him mention his wife, the Howard grad son. You think about that family, it is so expansive because it goes beyond his mother, it goes beyond his blood kin. It extends into everybody connected to them. So their law firm is not, their office isn't just the office, it's also like a hub for family and community. And so that kind of commitment is palpable because people then are invited in. In a minute, I'll talk about it in the context of one of his partners. What they were talking about last night, the whole idea that when you represent a client, they're a client, but they're not first a client, they're now a member of your family. You're not just you see you know details about their lives, and you want to know. You want to know about their family. You want to know about their community. You want to know their story and their journey. So when you go to court, you're not representing a client. You're representing a member of your family. That's the son of a teacher. That's the son of somebody who spent our classrooms, you know, who was in, and then who then says, and I love, like he said, you know, she reinvented herself, 78 years old. That's what Black people do. It's exactly what Black people do. You know, and it's interesting because, you know, in fact, I will, you know, this is a great picture of Mally there. You see him there. Let me get this up to them. Yeah, that's him standing there. He's always smiling. He would love those bow ties. If you want to, I know, tell you a little bit about it. Mally Mel Davis, renowned civil rights attorney, human rights organizer, author with over 30 years of experience in the movement for Black liberation. Yeah, it's going to be kind of 40 in a minute. Founding partner of Davis Bozeman Johnson Law, one of Georgia's largest African-American owned plaintiff law firms, co-leads the Civil Rights Division, secured multi-million-dollar settlements, including 13 million jury verdict in landmark sexual assault cases. Davis has also been instrumental in social justice victories such as ending cash bail in Atlanta and removing the Confederate monument in Decatur, Georgia. It's very beyond the courtroom. Davis co-founded impactful organizations, including the Black Man Lab, which is a fantastic shout out to that. We'll talk more about the Black Man Lab in a minute. If y'all remember, a couple of years ago when I was down here, when they had the Let Us Make Man convening, where they raised money for scholarships, and they have a Black Woman Lab as well. By the way, they meet regularly. Here it's Monday nights for the Black Man Lab, and the Beacon Hill Black Alliance for Human Rights serves as president-elect of National Conference of Black Lawyers, as I said, and a senior lecturer at Clark Atlanta University. At Clark, what Mally and them have been able to do in the Mac Jones Department of Political Science. Mac Jones, of course, one of the legendary figures, one of the founding figures of, in the academy, what's known as Black politics, the field of Black politics, political scientist. People probably more familiar with his two of his children, Tayari Jones, the author, and Bomani Jones, the sports commentator. But the Mac Jones Political Science Department at Clark Atlanta has a pre-law society that Mally has led in creating, and those young people were doing the moderating and doing the running around and working in service in the conference this weekend. So it's very, very powerful. He's been awarded the Georgia Super Lawyer title. City of South Fulton's Mally Mel Davis Appreciation Day is very interesting, but you know, just a true human being, and I'm lifting him now in part because, you know, when we think about how we approach this place we find ourselves in, many of us, won't say most now because they say everybody's worldwide. We have to think about the type of people that we want our young people to model. And we're talking a minute about the National Conference of Black Lawyers and their objectives and their purpose. And one of them is to get that next generation in. It's a very intergenerational area. And shout out to the current president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, Sister Whitley Carpenter. Very powerful sister out of North Carolina. These are the kind of people we want to model. And, you know, when I think about that in the terms of even Nubia, as we sit here, and we mentioned this in office hours on last Monday, and I mentioned it in passing last week when we were together, the question of a network. What does it mean to build a network? And there's a book called Network State. And I was at Sankofa last Friday, as I mentioned last week, and Dr. Amin and I were there for several hours, just, you know, setting up, talking with people, and then have office hours over there for students in my Howard University office hours. And Brother Jordan Strudrick, who's one of the young people who was in the leadership team at Sankofa, they put on the events. If you go to Sankofa's YouTube page, you'll often see him introducing some of the sessions. They do Haiti on My Mind, Sudan on My Mind, and on a regular basis. And so between him and Sister Maritu and Brother Jonathan, you know, this is the crew who kind of run the day-to-day at Sankofa in terms of the event programming and other things. Well, Jordan was telling me about this book, The Network State. So he sent me the book, and this guy, Balaji Srivananthan, and in reading the book, reading through the book, because it's set up so that you can like parse language and go back and forth in the book, he talks about the difference between a nation state which he says is identified by land, by physical place, and a network state, which Srivananthan writes is identified in his mind as being connected by minds. So a nation state, a physical state, a country, I think is probably a better way of thinking about it, because like the United States isn't a nation, it's a state with a lot of different nations in it, which kind of makes the point. But a state, a nation, so-called nation state or a country is identified by the land, by the country, the flag, where the borders are, you can come, movement, physical place. A network state is identified by minds, and that relational dynamic is very important to distinguish between a nation state and a network state. Nubia is a network state, but and it's interesting because the guy who wrote this, I had to look him up, obviously. So who is this guy? Well, at one time he ran Coinbase. And so I was reading some other articles. He was talking about meme coin and all this, the potential and the pitfalls, and how Trump has this certain sudden flash with all this imaginary wealth and value, but it's real if people think it's real. And so it's very interesting as he was talking about this. But what I got from the book, at least so far, and I think is useful, is that, in a place like Nubia, and even beyond that, because obviously we're worldwide on YouTube, and yeah, y'all hit that like button and freak the algorithm, as you would say, Prof. But as we do that, we understand that we're not just connecting in physical place, even though we all occupy a physical place. We're connecting our minds, we're connecting our spirits, we're connecting our souls and hearts. And so then when we come together physically, shout out to Mike Henderson and Karen Shropshire and all the folks who are in Nubia who are also lawyers. Mike's a lawyer, Karen's a lawyer, and who were there yesterday and who've been here at the NCBL. Mike traveled to be here. Of course, Karen is here in Atlanta. And, you realize that network state that we work in and live in together and connect in translates into physical power as we make choices driven by how we want to act in the physical world based on how we've connected in the network world. So people say, well, what is the purpose of this? What are we going to do? You're doing the thing that will lead to whatever else you want to do, and that's connecting. And that's connecting. And that relational dynamic, like I say, is essential. As I was saying, when Mauli was talking last night and talking about his law partner, Miguel, the good brother Miguel Dominguez, and when one of his comrades, and Miguel did a session yesterday, belief that inspires action, compassion as the cornerstone of achieving justice for our people at trial. And Mauli was bringing up the point, like yesterday, said, no, your client isn't just your client. Your client is now a member of your family, extended family, and that you know them and they know you. And so they're fighting for you. Part of that trust is that you've mastered your craft in a way that you can give them the best representation. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about how that translates into a name that we all know, a name that resonates here at this convening, at this physical convening, because so many people in this space knew her and know her now as an ancestor. Of course, I'm talking about Ashala Shakur. We're going to get to that in a minute, but it's very important to understand because that is very African. It's very African. And when you think about in Kemet, for example, the trial of Heru and Setek, the trial of Horus and Set, Horus's lawyer, Heru's lawyer is Jehudi, the Greeks call Thoth. They know each other. In fact, Thoth helped Heru get here, the son of Isis and Osiris, or Osar and Set. So I've known you since before you were a baby. I know how you were conceived. I'm going to represent you here before the Neteru. And we're going to get this thing settled out. But the point is that, and we understand that. We absolutely understand that. How do we know? We understand that when we think about all these movies that come out of Hollywood about hero lawyers who get to know their clients, right? This is John Grisham. Right, this is early Matt Damon, right, falling in love with his client, and that's okay. This is The Firm, right? This is Tom Cruise. The whole idea, and then they'll say we fell in love with the law. No, I fell in love with people. I used the law to express that love in this particular craft. I did not fall in love with the law. At least African people didn't fall in love with the law. And like yesterday, we were talking, Angie and I, in the conversation and making a distinction between a social structure rendering of law as a Western concept and protocol in terms of how we move through the space. As we were talking, one of the things I said, we never stop being Africans. We have never stopped being Africans. We've added experiences. We've complicated what it means to be an African. That constantly changes because life changes and cultures bleed and all that. I said, but this is not something that should be unfamiliar to anyone in this convening. Because if you've ever gone to church, you don't say law having been established. We Africans, protocol having been established. No, there's a way you move through the space. Now, you're going to abandon that because you walked in a courtroom or you filed a piece of paper or you had to read a statute and no. In fact, I was talking to a brother who teaches here at Georgia State College of Law who worked here in the state capital of Georgia writing legislation. And one of the things that he mentioned as we were talking, he said, yeah, I tell my students, you got to come through me to do anything in the law. He said, what does it mean? He said, because I was one of the people who wrote the laws that you were interpreting. And in fact, he was talking specifically about contract law. And he was talking about how people talk about offer, acceptance, and consideration. He said, but you don't see offer and acceptance mentioned in the statutes that we wrote here in Georgia. He said, because we take that for granted that there's offer and acceptance. He said, now we're getting into the terms of what it means to do offer and acceptance. What are the specific terms of contracts? And the students began to realize, yeah, anything we're going to argue in court or anything we're going to argue in a brief or anything we're going to argue on appeal, anything we're going to argue involving that statute came through you because you wrote the language. He says, exactly. But you don't fall in love with the language. Although there is a love for language that's essential. I'll talk about that in a moment as well, because you got to be able to master and command the language, because that's going to reveal the hypocrisy. And we'll talk about this in a minute as well. I'm setting down some markers that will come to bear in a couple of minutes as we bring them back around. So remember that language and how command of language will reveal the real motives underneath. He says, but you fall in love with what you're trying to achieve. You don't fall in love just with the abstract concept of words or language. You fall in love with what you're trying to achieve. And that's a very important moment to have as a conversation. And, I was it was very moving to sit there. And, Mally introduced us. And then, Angie and I having this conversation. And it was very much something to hear. Well, he introduced the young people who introduced us. So Madupwe and Gabrielle Stevenson. Who was at Clark, Atlanta, one of his students. A lot of the pre-law students are here. And as they introduced us, they sat with us and they sat on there were 4 chairs. They sat on the outside and the two of us, Angie and I, sat together. And as we were having this conversation, it was a very, I don't even know how I would describe it. It wasn't surreal. It was very natural, but it was very fulfilling is a word, but it isn't quite the word. Satisfied. We're never satisfied. Hope, absolutely hopeful, but I'm always hopeful because I know where this ends, how this ends, because I know where we came from and what we've done since. It was an important moment to mark because, hearing her and then hearing people respond and then interact and hearing us think with and interact through community in real time in a room, with some of the most innovative and forward-thinking word warriors, African word warriors, and there were others who non-Africans there too as well, freedom fighters, was inspiring, it was transformative, and it was instructive. I think instructive is the most important thing because, again, Mally got all these young people over here who are undergraduate or Clark, Atlanta, and they want to be lawyers. It's a very instructive moment to be surrounded by lawyers who are doing the kind of work you want to do with your whole heart, because it reveals that you can do that work. They have done that work. They are doing that work, and you can do that work. Don't go somewhere where they tell you, oh, you can't do that. I mean, the law won't allow you. You can go to hell. I seen people. No. I just spent time with people who were Black Panthers, who defended Black Panthers, members of the Black Liberation Army. It's very interesting to see, Jeff Fort's daughter was there. Y'all know Jeff Fort, of course, from the El Rookins, or formerly known as the Peace Stone Nation or the Blackstone Rangers. He has been incarcerated for decades, and and she was having a conversation with an elder who was incarcerated for 51 years. We're going to talk about him in a minute, Veronza Bowers Jr. Baba Veronza was there last night, And in that process, is you sitting there as a young person, you thinking to yourself, huh, man, they threw everything they had, and you came out of jail like prison, like whatever. Because what I'm not going to do is abandon my people. And it's very important to understand that. So I just want to spend a couple of seconds on the program and then tie some things together. This question of not doing it by yourself. Baba Roger Wareham, like I said, one of the great lawyers of our time, they had a panel on what they call movement lawyering. And that's one label given it. But as they were saying in the conversation, the idea of being a movement lawyer not only is not new, we ain't had no title for it or name for it. You're attorney for the people. In fact, let me read you the mission statement of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. This goes back to 1968 when they met at Cappahannock, Virginia. Black lawyers came together and said, we got to defend our people. We got to fight for our people. This is the statement, the mission statement of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. NCBL is formed to serve as the legal arm of the movement for Black liberation, to protect human rights, to achieve self-determination of African and African communities in the diaspora, and to work in coalition to assist in ending oppression of all people. That's a powerful statement. If you ever, and it's interesting because when you go back to 1968, 1969, that period, that 2-year period between 68 and 70, you will see the formation of many of these organizations, which many of which persist to this day, which are grounded in the Black Power movement, as it is called, the Black Power movement here in the United States. The one that comes most immediately to mind that connects to our weekly convenings, if y'all will remember a couple of years ago, back in March, maybe 2 years ago, this past March, we were in New Orleans. Another organization that traces back to 1968 and then 69 is the National Association of Black Social Workers. And it's no accident that they have red, black, and green in their colors, and you see the fist and all that, because these are people from the Black Power era. And so yesterday, to hear Baba Roger talk about, in this conversation around movement lawyering, the idea that don't be like a lone gun, like the rifleman or paladin or one of these have gun will travel people. No, you need community in order to build. It's very important to understand that. To hear Lou Outlaw, as I said, or Watani Tahimba, Baba Watani, who was an investigator a long time. First time I met Baba Tahimba, Baba Watani Tahimba, he was serving as an advisor and an elder for a young brother who grew up in the community that is represented here by all these folks who were very much familiar with, and in fact represented among other clients, his mother, Afeni. I'm talking about Tupac Shakur. So the first time I met Baba Watani, it was in Indianapolis, remember serves me correctly, it was 1993. And that's when I realized, oh, I see who's around Tupac. And if you read as a recent book by Santi Holly's book, The Shakurs and the Nation They Created. It's called An American Family, The Shakurs and the Nation They Created. The nation ain't the United States. The nation is the Shakur family and the Black Power movement, and NCBL and National Association of Black Social Workers come out of that movement, out of that moment. And thinking about that, you know, when he was on the RICO panel with Lou, with Professor Outlaw and Professor Gabe Banks, who was widely respected for his expertise in criminal defense. And as they were talking, you know, it's a reminder that, you know, when you go in a courtroom where you're dealing with any form of interacting with the legal system in this country, or any political system, any system, you're dealing with people. You know, the system counts on trying to give us a sense that it is inevitable, that you're going to lose, so that you defeat yourself before you ever walk into a space. But what was really striking as we were having these conversations yesterday was this plenary conversation we had with your brother Veronza Bowers Jr. 51 years this brother spent in prison. The last 20 taken from him arbitrarily by some funky ass white nationalists, one of whom spoke Spanish. And I'll come to him in a second as well. He was from Baba Veronza is from McAlester, Oklahoma. And people might not have heard of that, but when he said yesterday that he went to Toussaint Louverture High School, to Overture High School in Oklahoma, Everybody kind of, oh yeah, yeah. There's many high schools named for Overture, Toussaint Louverture in the United States of America during that period. And one of the things that he talked about, he's a former Panther. Well, once a Panther, always a Panther. He's a Black Panther. And Barbara Verons is very peaceful. I know before the moment started, before the plenary started, before we had the conversation with him, I was got a chance to meet a sister who has worked, and she moderated the panel as well, Kiana Jones, who's a co-pastor here in Atlanta. And for the first time, got a chance to embrace physically a brother who had the opportunity to be in conversation with digitally for years. He is the person who is at the anchor of Black Power Media, Kalonji Jamachanga. And I'd never met Kalonji in person. You know, time I've been in Atlanta. He's based Atlanta based, but he's all up and down and out of the city. And so he's very close with Barbara Veranza and a lot of the freedom fighters, and particularly the political prisoners. There's a lot of work around political prisoners. He said, "I want you to meet Barbara Veranza." That's okay. So I mean, we sitting there talking, very peaceful spirit. You know, a lot of times people who have suffered great trauma, particularly over extended periods of time, people who have been imprisoned, people who have been had their freedom of movement at least arrested. You know, sometimes, you know, in my experience, and I'm sure you've had that same experience. I'm sure we all have had. There's a certain kind of calmness and serenity. They don't do a whole lot of movement around. It's like, because I mean, these are people who have had to face their mortality in a different way, who have had a lot of time to think about time. And so the profundity, I mean, the depth of thinking is palpable. It's obvious. And so, you know, sitting there talking with the elder, and then they started the conversation. And in the parts of the conversation, what he talked about was the contradiction between the letter of the law and the application of the law. So the idea, for example, and in his case, he got a sentence that said after you have served half that sentence, you get automatic parole. For him, that was 30 years because they accused him of killing a police officer, national park ranger, which he didn't do. He said, I didn't do that. But they didn't care. They put him in jail, put him in prison rather. And at the end of that process, they had told him his release date. He said, I gave all my stuff away. I only kept a couple of things. And so he has a flute, which he played last night called a skadahutachi. Skadahutachi. Skadahutachi is a Japanese word, but you know, he is part Cherokee, and he talks about his indigenous heritage, and he talks about mastering this instrument and mastering it while in prison, and how it transformed him and how he uses music to transform other people. Be still. Let's experience this present moment. So anyway, he said, I gave all my stuff away, except a couple of things, that being one of them. And I prepared, you know, people are telling me, okay, yeah. And so like 2 days before, they said, okay, we got to bring you to court. Okay. They said, yeah, no, you're not getting released today. What? Yeah. That happened twice. One time they said because the person who was killed, their widow, hadn't had an opportunity to testify or to give her statement, so she did. And then they keep him and said it was just a minor thing. And so they said, okay, now here's the date, okay? Because it's automatic parole. He shows up. They bring him back to court. He shows up. Of course, they take him. He has no choice. He said, I'm getting ready to get out. No, you're not going to be released today. And then a Spanish-speaking white supremacist named Alberto Gonzalez. Perhaps y'all remember that. He was the attorney general for a time under George W. Bush, a circus clown who, when he was the White House counsel, wrote the infamous memo that said the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to enemy combatants. Remember enemy combatants in the wake of 9/11, 2001? And the idea they just disappear you anywhere or in any place, in any time, something that is now becoming familiar to people who never thought it could happen to them, but it's always been familiar to African people because we got disappeared. The initial disappearance, of course, was when we got snatched from the continent of Africa. Understand? So yeah, that's Alberto Gonzalez. He was the attorney general at the time, and he got appeals from, as Barbara Veranza was telling us yesterday, from thousands of police officers from around the United States of America, not to let him go. as Tupac would say, who is the biggest gang of N-words in the city or in the country? That would be the police. And so they wrote Gonzalez. So as Gonzalez said, yeah, we're going to keep you indefinitely. Yeah, but the letter of the law says, yeah, I don't care about that. We're going to keep you indefinitely. That was 20 more years, 2 more decades, 51 years Verronza Bowers Jr. spent behind the wall. And you know what he talked about yesterday? He talked about meditation. He talked about living life literally one breath at a time. And afterwards, I went up to him and said, Baba, that's the only way you can live it, huh? One breath at a time. He said, I'm trying to tell you. He says, you know how important breath is when you're taking those last ones and you're fighting to get that last breath. You can only live it one breath at a time. The past is gone. The future never gets here. The present is all you have. It's informed by memory. It's informed by the past. You anticipate what you want to do in the future. You can plan for it, but you can only live life one breath at a time. What a powerful lesson to embrace the moment. And you know, when you're listening to an elder like that, and you're thinking about it, and you think about the problems that you have in your life, because you can't help but think about it when you see a man like that, when you see a woman like that, when you see a woman like Assata Shakur, like so many of the people who were convened here knew and saw her and traveled to Cuba and spent time with her. When you are with people like that, it puts everything into, here's another word he used last night, perspective. We all have problems. Problems gonna hit us later today. Problems might hit us right now while we're in this space. Problems will have hit us in the past. But guess what? Right now, one at a time. He said, Baba Verronza says, if as you embrace the now and embrace your circumstances, he says, you then are allowed in your being an opportunity to access what he called it, access the darkest recesses of your mind. The places where you might not think you can access. Just be still. 51 years. No, not 51 years. One breath at a time. That's what time is. And then he played this instrument, this indigenous flute, indigenous to Japanese people. These the model of the flute, the sakatutachi. And in playing it, he then played something he had recorded on his phone, which was some music that they had made in a poem he had written for Assata Shakur. And you think about that, you get time like that added to an initial sentence and not flinching. He said, no, there are tears, there's anger, but then you recenter. And he says, you know, you can only experience it in only experiencing life one breath at a time. You accept your being, you be, and you can occupy that being more fully. And then he said, you can't keep hope alive in the abstract. You have to put in the work. Man, think about that as we continue to pray for Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson and listening to his son, Jesse Jr., talk about, you know, the challenges as Reverend Jackson continues to fight on this side of reality. And you think about Jesse Jackson saying, keep hope alive, but it wasn't an abstract concept. You keep hope alive. You keep hope alive by putting in the work. And in putting in the work, that's where you find the meaning. It's really quite something to be in spaces like that. You know, I was listening to yesterday they've had a couple of couple of panels on reparations. Let me see if I got I have it right here. Hearing the good sister Ajua Aliatoro, you heard me talk about her before, and my sister, of course, Nkichi Taifa, they put together a book, and they talked about this in a workshop yesterday. This is the NCBL, National Conference of Black Lawyers Working to Obtain Reparations, Balancing the Scales of Justice Handbook for Community Organizing. Now everybody is so funny. We're talking about, we were laughing about this yesterday, saying people are now calling themselves reparationists, and everybody's in it, and they're writing books and they talking theories. Oh, it's all very good work. But when you're in a room with people like this, and of course these two sisters were at the founding of and still very active in and foundational to the work of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBRA. And you've heard me talk about NCOBRA before, even from a couple of NCOBRA conferences over the arc of our nearly 300 convenings together. And, you know, it's important to be in a space where you see these long distance runners who are now in conversation with some people in their late teens, or as in the case of the Colombo young people who came and performed last night before the major panel yesterday on Asada Shakur, some of them as young as 6 or 7 years old, to be in those spaces, because then that kind of thinking about self-determination isn't an add-on, isn't an accessory. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be for those who didn't come up that way, but for people who come up that way, grounded in this, it's the norm. It's not the exception to the rule. And so in the conversation on reparations, we were talking about that yesterday. Reparations, as we've talked about many times here, isn't about compensation, although that's an element of it. It's about declaring your right, your ability, your being to be whole and full on its own terms, to have its own ways of knowing, its own cultural meaning making, its own capacity to pass on from generation to generation, or movement and memory. And in that space, you've created your own governance space with, as Angie would say, its own protocols. And so from that, then you engage wherever and whatever you need to engage in the social structure you find yourself in, because that is how you repair. You don't repair by getting a check. You want the resources for sure, but that's not what repairs you any more than going in the courtroom and pleading for someone to recognize you is what's going to repair you. What's going to repair you is before you ever walk in the courtroom. What's going to repair you is before you ever walk into the Congress or the city hall or the school board or any of the number of other places where you saw people achieve real blows against fascism last Tuesday in the elections in the United States. But I'm talking about that next. Those aren't the end goal. The end goal is to get people up off your back. Your justice claim is based on the fact that you're a full human being before you ever walk into space. And so it's very interesting last night, April and Cliff Albright, of course, we know them from April as legal counsel. Cliff is one of the co-founders with Latasha Brown of Black Voters Matter. And, it's very interesting, listening to them last night and then talking to them afterward. They came into Selma and Cliff, I'm not talking about Cliff and April, and they were courting and then got married, and they're in Selma, Alabama, working with the great Fire Rose and Hank Sanders. And you heard me talk about Fire Rose and Hank. In fact, I think maybe the first time we talked about them, if you go back in the compendia and go back in our bibliography, we were in Baltimore for a meeting of the National Black Family Summit. The great elder and now ancestor Baba Lynn Dunstan, and Fire Rose and Hank were there, two lawyers, both of them, children of the South, Alabama, met in law school at Harvard Law School, which don't mean nothing except they were there together, and then have spent their lives and continue to spend their lives as freedom fighters all over the world, but anchored in Alabama and particularly in Selma. So, April down there practicing law, interacting with them, Cliff down there, and they're all part, Cliff, April, Latasha, all part of the Malcolm X Grassroots Coalition. See, when we see them on MSNBC or CBS, when we see them on CNN or see them in the New York Times, that is a social structure front-facing kind of representation, and it's essential. And we are often led to narrate them as voting rights warriors, and they absolutely are as they ride around the country in what's called the blackest bus in America. But you have to see them as in the governance space. Who are they to us, and who are we to them? Who are we as part of this collective? And last night they were talking about going to Selma, moving to Selma as young people, as organizers, and setting up, extending the Malcolm X Grassroots Coalition, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, setting up institutions. And of course, they're coming into a space that have institutions. There's no institution more palpable, more deeply rooted, more influential, especially in places like the South, but not exclusive to the South, but I'm thinking about the South now, as the Black church. So people want to know, as they were saying last night, what's your name? They want to know, what's your church home? And they want to know, in Selma, at least as they talked about it years ago, who you voting for. As they said, in Selma, Alabama, particularly given the stakes and what has happened in Selma, voting is a religion. And so there was a mayor in Selma when they got there by the name of Joe Smitherman. Joe Smitherman was the mayor of Selma for 37 years. He was the mayor that participated in sick and white supremacy on Martin Luther King. In fact, he referred to Dr. King, and he referred to that whole movement. He was a segregationist. He called Martin Luther King Martin Luther Coon. And, y'all can look it up. He was the mayor for almost 40 years. In fact, the first black school superintendent in Selma, he fired him because he was the brother was dismantling the segregated school system. This guy got to go. Joe, in fact, they started a campaign called Joe's Got to Go to get rid of Joe Smitherman. So they were talking last night, April and Cliff said, we down here, these young people, we organizing, we getting people together, and we weren't getting a lot of traction in how we were approaching it. And then we realized these people are really concerned about voting, and they want to get rid of this guy. Joe's got to go. And they said, well, okay. And then you understand, if you are embracing Africana ways of knowing, which they wouldn't label it that way, but that's absolutely what it is. And of course, they would have no pushback about that. This idea that we are community, not only idea, this lived experience of community, then you understand this is what the people want. It's very much Fannie Lou Hamer. I'll talk about her in a moment as well in a different context. But you come into a space, this is the old SNCC thing. You come into a space, you ask people what they want, and you ask them how you can help them get it. So that's what they did, these young people. And they said, well, voting is important. Okay, we got it. All right, we not, we have a different concept of self-determination, a different way of thinking about it. But because we are African people, we are with you. And so, yeah, let's get out here and do that. Plus, we're coming into an institution. We're not trying to displace institutions. We're trying to strengthen them. So, okay, let's do that. And April says, the night in the year 2000, the fall of 2000, when James Perkins Jr. became the first black mayor of Selma, and equally, if not more importantly, defeated Joe Smitherman, the man who referred to Martin King as Martin Luther Coon, the man who was part of the cabal that beat up people on the Edmund Pettus Bridge only because he was the mayor at the time, and he's a segregationist, man right there with George Wallace and all the rest of them. Well, they said the night that Selma got rid of him, they said they went outside and they saw black people celebrating in the street. They was dancing in the street. They was on top of cars. And at that moment, Cliff and April said, we got it. We got it. Now, Black voters matter. I don't know that there's a more important formation right now in the United States of America as it relates to our governance formations, Black control, Black working, and spread out. I don't know there's a more important formation that we have, but the founders of it, the young people then at the anchor of that 25 years ago, those are Pan-African nationalists, just like me. I'm a proud Pan-Africanist, proud nationalist. I don't beat up the American descendants of slavery concept because I know where it comes from. It's diseducation, it's weaponized ignorance, and it will be overrun. But you don't disrespect the people because those people are African people too, regardless of how they narrate themselves. And so in that conversation, it's very interesting. Then April said something I thought was transformative. I said, I wish this could be recorded and played everywhere. She said that voting isn't the objective. Voting means providing immediate relief as we nation build. Nation building is the objective. Voting is about providing temporary and immediate relief, which is why you got to keep doing it. I said, hey, that's genius. I ain't gonna vote no more. Hold on, what you trying to do? Well, I'd like to get a little money, get start my business. Okay, so voting's gonna hurt that? No. Voting is going to provide you some immediate relief as you pursue your initial objective, your eventual objective. Don't look at voting as a means to an end. We say that all the time, but the example of what happened in Selma, I think, was transformative. The night Perkins won, they watched them Negroes celebrating and said, providing immediate relief as we nation build. The ultimate work is nation building. Use every tool. Now, I want us to think about that now because, we know commercial news, entertainment, mass media, and those who are looking for clicks and likes and who are saying sensationalist things, vomiting out of their mouths without explaining where they came from or what they mean by it and just hoping to stir controversy. We know that whatever those people are doing, that's a temporary thing. Remember, this, we're recording this, we're doing it, streaming it live on Saturday, the 15th of November. And we also understand that this time last week, we were saying, okay, shut down and travel and people are not going to eat. And then the deal was struck that same time as we talking. And then the story was Dems gave, oh my God, into the world, the Democratic Party in disarray. Here we are, not even a week into that news cycle. And guess where the stories are going now? Republicans going to only push it to the 30th. Oh, they're in disarray with all the Epstein files and oh my God, and the Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, that's what they do. Stay focused, 10 toes down in your governance formation, because them stories going to change again by the time we finish today. They might be changing right now. If I was to refresh on the New York Times website or Al Jazeera or Financial Times or any of the other places, Talking Points Memo or any of the other dozen places I try to read every day, guess what? It's going to change. That's their job. But when you understand that, then you understand that you must look behind that and you can see what else is going on. What else is going on? We're not going to do a rehearsal of all that shutdown stuff. We're not going to do all that because the government is open back up now. It's open season. But guess what? It's always been open season on us. And the Republicans, if they had been smart in the white nationalist party, they would have extended all the food benefits months ago. So now they extended them. Now you got a year. So guess what? They think we took that issue away. No, you took that issue away, but that health care is still looming, baby. And every story they were writing in September and October, and up until the so-called deal in November, they're going to write again in January. Everybody calm down. And it's going to be a problem, a bigger problem now because January the 1st will hit. And then those premiums, yikes. Oh, maybe I'll get catastrophic health care if I can afford that at all. Maybe I won't have any health care and just hold my breath. I hope I don't get sick. Yeah. Whose fault is this? It's the Dems. No, y'all tried that for 3 days after the damn government opened back up. Them stories are stale. Now you done turn back around. And guess what? Now some more emails came out. And now you found out what? Oh my God. Yeah, you see Bozo trying to throw Bill Clinton in the street. You can throw Bill in the street. I don't care if Bill Clinton had a little girl in his lap and you sitting right next to him. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Let's open up the files. The distractions aren't working anymore. Y'all ever been hit with a stick so many times you don't feel that stick no more? That's one of Malcolm X's lines that always stuck with me. He said, y'all do so, y'all pull so-and-so, y'all threaten me with so-and-so. I don't feel that stick no more. That's how I feel when I get communiques from administrators, and I was an administrator for years, who would say, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I know how the thing works because I know what the objective is. The objective is to educate students. The objective is to get them in and out in a timely manner and to, while they're here, give them the best possible education. And so I know some of the emails I get from y'all who ain't never been in a classroom, who don't understand that that's not a real issue. I don't feel that stick no more. I'll do what's necessary to comply in a certain space, but let me be crystal clear about that. You've buried the lead. You've missed the whole point. Well, guess what? The white nationalists, all the scare tactics, all the more and more extreme rhetoric, all the stuff you talking about, sent the biggest battleship in the damn military, the Gerald R. Ford, to the Caribbean Sea, and you got some people thinking you're going to invade Venezuela this weekend. I'll say less about that. The whole point is that whether you do or you don't, people don't feel that stick anymore in the same way. You done killed 80% of 100 people, over 80 now in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. And then people say they're going to sue you. The family of the fishermen that you killed going to sue you. Now, will they win? Will they lose? That ain't the point. I'm spending this time with master lawyers, warrior lawyers who have lost many cases, who have won many cases. And in the case of Baba Varanza, ultimately won. At the heart of his defense team, Black lawyers, but not exclusively Black lawyers. He was talking about being at University of California, Berkeley a few weeks ago in conversations with people there who weren't part of his legal team. See, this is the point. Being a Black lawyer, being a Black word warrior of any form, lawyer, journalist, being someone who has mastered language and who does combat with language. I don't mean has learned a lot of vocabulary words and then slightly misuses them in a way that almost sounds Amos and Andy-ish. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about true masters of language. I'm sorry, I'm giving out strays, but people accuse me of that. It's not a stray, actually. I have a bullseye on the back of people who mangle language. Let me be very clear about that. I'm not talking about mangling language because they haven't had the opportunity or the inclination to command language. I'm talking about mangling language and when they put themselves out as a wordsmith or an elocutionist. Let me stop clowning these people. Anyway, the point is this. These people have won and lost many word wars. But the only time you lose for real is when you stop fighting. And you've never stopped fighting, because in the hope is the practice. It becomes real as you practice it, breath by breath, moment by moment. And so these language warriors understand that. So some of the major themes so far, just thinking about this in terms of where I am right now, and just being in community with these elders and with these young people and with these age mates like my man, Mowley Davis, is that language matters, warriors matter, and the strength you draw and the instruction you draw about how to move through the world. You know, again, these conversations are very interesting. Fear is always there. Fear is there. In fact, last night in the conversation, I want to talk about this Asada panel in a moment, because that really, man, that was the highlight in many ways of a day of highlights. But, oh man, being in this conversation, there is fear. Sister Deborah Jackson, who was a law student, who assisted the great Lennox Hines, who has been Assata Shakur's attorney for over 50 years. Over 50 years. Think about that, y'all. She said, you know, I was in law school. I just knew that when I got my degree, although my name was on legal briefs before I graduated from law school because I was helping them, she said, I knew when I graduated I was going to spend my time on Assata Shakur's defense team and helping with the appeals. And then we looked up in November. We're protesting at the UN. We're out there, you know, with the pictures of Malcolm, and we're talking about self-determination. And the message comes. What? Yeah, because a couple of days before, November the 2nd, Assata Shakur disappeared from the jail. So they already, then on the 5th of November, at the protest, here comes the message from somewhere in the world, as she said. Nobody knows it's Cuba. Nobody knows where she is. She just knows she ain't in jail. And the message comes, Malcolm X's fight is now my fight. Said, well, I guess I ain't ever being on the appeal team no more. Why, she out. And as we were laughing last night, she said, let me be clear at the onset. I don't know who did it. And I don't know anybody who knows anybody who did it. It's the statute of limitations. Everybody started laughing. Why? These are masters of the law. Don't nobody know nothing. I don't know. You know? Unlike the Epstein files, you ain't got to worry about any of that stuff ever being related. And who knows the process? But we know one thing. Assata Shakur graduated without the hands of her captors on her. And this is a room full of people who were her solidarity brothers and sisters. And it was a great pleasure to be in a room with them. And it will be a great pleasure to be in a room with them again today and tonight. Because that is instructive. And in the conversation, a brother who, you know, another legend who's worked for many years with Maryland Legal Aid, but is himself a son of Trinidad, who went to school in Mississippi, never had the chance to embrace him physically. But buddy, I tell you what, look up Wilhelm Joseph, or William. They would say William, but it's spelled W-I-L-H-E-L-M. Wilhelm, almost like Wilhelm, but it's William. Joseph, one of them good Caribbean names, right? Listening to Barbara Williams yesterday, we were sitting there talking, and he came from Trinidad. He went to school in Itabena, Mississippi. Y'all know about that HBCU in Itabena, the great Mississippi Valley State. Bob Williams said, that's when I met a sister from Sunflower County, Mississippi, named Fannie Lou Hamer. And I became a disciple of Fannie Lou Hamer, a protege of Fannie Lou Hamer. I love Miss Hamer. And he talked about how he went to law school. This is William Joseph from Trinidad and Tobago, went to Mississippi Valley. He said, I got put out of Mississippi Valley twice. I was like, how'd you get to law school, Bobby William? He said, I got back in. He said, one of the times we were protesting, organized protests, and the president of Valley called the police on us. Oh, man, are you serious? Yeah. And, you know, he's a master storyteller. You know, these elders are often master storytellers. So I'm sitting there talking to him. There's a couple more people. We standing around now, and he's just telling us this story. This is in between the panels and in between in the conversation. We out there talking, and he's just talking. And then he says, and I went to Ole Miss. You went to law school at Ole Miss. Yeah. I said, in the 70s, man, you were at Ole Miss in 1969. I said, Barbara Williams, you entered the University of Mississippi as a first-year law student 5 years after James Meredith tried to get in as the first Black, and they set the campus on fire. He said, yeah. And I graduated. I said, man, come on. Then he said they had a tradition in Oxford, Mississippi. If you were a graduate of the University of Mississippi Law School, you had to go to downtown Oxford and take your official photograph for graduation in the yearbook. You had to take it in front of this building. So he said, I went down there and they said, why are you here? He says, I'm a graduate. I'm here to take my photograph. And he said, you can't take a photograph. I said, because you were Black? He said, no. They would want to say that, but I am graduating, so you got to take my picture. He says, because of what I had on. He said, let me show you what I had on. So he pulls his phone out. He turns the phone around. I see the picture. I took off running. You know, I see how people laugh when they run. I just bust out laughing. He's roaring when he shows this picture on his phone. So I come back and Mally's standing back. I said, Mally, hey man, come and look at this. But show him the picture you showed me. Look, this is his yearbook picture. This is the picture he took when he graduated from Ole Miss. Mally looks at it. He starts roaring. Wilhelm Joseph took his photograph for graduation from the University of Mississippi Ole Miss Law School, this freedom fighter from Trinidad, friends with Fannie Lou Hamer, with a full kente wrap with his shoulder like he was the Asante Hene in Kumasi, Ghana. I said, where's it? They put the picture in the book. Let me tell y'all something. Don't defeat yourself before you meet the enemy on the battlefield. I'm like, man, I said, now I got to find this yearbook. I said, man, you know, he's in Maryland, so I'm gonna call you, man, because I want to see the actual book. And if I get this picture, I'm gonna show y'all this picture. He's like not like a kente stole like people wearing for graduation, not even like my academic robe at Howard, which I wish I wouldn't have ran a robe at all. But no, like he is literally sitting under an umbrella in Kumasi with the royal court. He got a full kente. I ain't even asking where he got it from. This is good Lord. See, once you begin to speak the truth, however, you're going to be targeted. They talked about that a lot. In fact, William Joseph got in trouble in the same state of Mississippi because when Asada was pulling together her defense team and Lennox Hines was on the defense team, there was a brother who was working at the time with legal aid in Mississippi. They're getting federal dollars for this, and William Joseph is directing the center there in Mississippi with these federal dollars. This brother says he wants to go and join the defense team in New Jersey, join the defense team for Asad Shakur. So Baba Williams like, okay, yeah, I got you. Go on up there for several months. They then call William Joseph before the bar. They want to take his law license. Why? They said, you had a guy working for you who's a lawyer, and you should have protected him because his license is threatened because he's being paid with federal dollars and he's not in Mississippi, he's in New Jersey. But the real issue was he's defending a person who we would like to see dead or in jail at the very least. And in the process of talking about that, he said, no, I'm going to fight it. And so I think he said he got a 1 year he got a probation warning in his file. But he said, I don't care. I don't care if they take the license. I'm not going to back up. This sister is in trouble. And I'm going to, the man wants to go. I want him to go, send him up there. Meanwhile, they try to take Lennox Hines' law license. He's leading the defense. He's part of the defense team leading the defense of Asada Shakur in New Jersey. So what does Hines do? Lennox Hines sued them. He said, I'm suing y'all. Y'all interfering with me. They back up off him. It's very important to understand that you don't concede in advance. What did the guy say, Tim Snyder, and on fascism? Do not concede in advance, and everybody's repeating it. Do not concede in advance. Well, guess what? Black people have been knowing that for a very long time. Very important. And one of the things they were talking about last night, it said, I'm sure that everything we talking about tonight will be in the FBI files by tomorrow, because there's somebody here who will talk about it. But you don't live your life in fear. You have fear, but you push past it breath by breath. And community is how you do it. Our strength is in community. Last night, some of the young people are asking, what are the organizations we can get involved in to help? Well, there's one right here, NCBL. There's another Jericho movement. Kalonji was talking about the Jericho movement, fighting for political prisoners to be released, free them all. Because they will tell you in the United States of America, there are no political prisoners. That's absolutely a lie. But the importance then is in teaching and doing intergenerational work. So young people say, well, let me join the fight. And here, this highlight of the conference, and this come begin to turn to a close in a minute here. A highlight of this conference, this is Shada Shakur Remembrance and Discussion. I'm looking at the program, the special Asada Shakur session. This is the program. And it was led by the children of Colombo. As I mentioned, I said I was going to talk about that in a minute. Colombo has his 20th anniversary coming up. If you're in the Atlanta area on the 20th of November, 5 days from now, if you're watching this in real-time stream, but if you're watching it later in the week, if you're around, at Porter Sanford III Performing Arts and Community Center in Decatur at 6 p.m., folks are gathering. I think the tickets are like $35. You can go on Colombo's website, Kilombo school, Quilombo. Quilombo is like the maroon communities of Brazil. And Mama Aminata Umoja is the founder. Mama Tashia Umoja, now running the school with her team of crack educators. Mama Aminata, who we had on Sirius this week, the Mind Nine, and they came in and talked with us on Urban View Mornings, tells a story about being a full-time educator. She's a master teacher, has been teaching for many years, and saying, our children need something else. Our children need to be grounded in themselves and their identity. And so reaching out to a community here in Atlanta, First African Church, they started the school. And in starting the school and using that space, it just continued to grow. And now it's in its 20th year. And those young people last night ran into my man, David Wall Rice, my friend and brother, comrade, who was at Morehouse College. Both of their children are at Quilombo. He had Biko, his oldest son, with him. And, Biko had come up, Brother Mark, and those of you saw the ritual at Tuskegee, Karen and I were talking about that, Shropshire, the ritual for Mark Holland, who's part of the Howard University alumni here in Atlanta, who do the annual bus trip from Atlanta, joining those bus trips from Detroit and from Chicago, who come to Howard, and then all the other bus trips to all the HBCUs. Mark made transition and they had his ritual at Tuskegee. We were talking about that. But Biko came on that trip last spring. And so I was laughing. I said, you make up your mind yet, man? You coming to Howard? I said, you going to Morehouse, huh? Where your old man is. We stand there laughing. But his younger brother, Stokely, is a drummer at Quilombo. He drummed in the ritual they did last night, the opening ritual, which was just so beautiful. Stokely's a student at Quilombo. And so it's just beautiful to see him. They opened up with a ritual, the drummers and dancers, about 20 of these young people came from Quilombo, and it was just beautiful. This one little girl, she was the smallest one, probably the youngest one in the group. She was dancing. She danced out her head wrap. I'm like, come on, girl. And it's just beautiful to see because you got elders in that room. You got people who are true battle-tested freedom fighters, to see the joy in their faces, to see these young people. And, in those moments, I think about the people who don't have the opportunity to see that, who have not yet had it. Again, but in the network state, as I'm talking about it here, you can imagine in your mind, and you can also know that you can see that not just in Atlanta or Philly, not just in DC or New York, not just in LA or the Bay Area, not just in Seattle or Kansas City, not just in Houston no. Most of those places I name are places we've been in class at some point, whether it be the Shape Center in Houston, Brother Deloitte, or whether it be, you name it. But my point is this: you can see it. And if you are in a place where it doesn't exist anywhere in the world, you can be it. One breath at a time, you can build it because you're part of a network state. You're part of a community that isn't connected just by place, but by mind, by imagination, by memory. And so after they finished that ritual, which was so beautiful, which was, by the way, a continuation of a ritual they had on the actual day of the escape. November the 2nd is the date they mark at the Mount Welcome Baptist Church here in the Atlanta area. Shout out to Dr. Rosalind Satchel, my friend here, who was part of that, and as well Baba AK, Akinyelu Mojo, of course, and the whole community. So they had a lot of the freedom fighters, a lot of the elders who were here there. And after that, they had a conversation. Lennox Hines, as I said, the attorney, and attorney Deborah Jackson, lawyers. And at that time, she was a law student when Assata was imprisoned. It was very interesting to hear this conversation between them and to hear Baba Lennox say, your calling is service. You have to serve. And to hear Mama Deborah and Baba Lennox talking about, the story of how these folks who have been locked down for so long, talked about visiting the great Mutulu Shakur, who some people know as Tupac's godfather, of course. And if y'all remember, a couple of years ago when I was in Gainesville, Florida, Baba AK gave me a physical copy of Souls, the academic journal, where they did a special issue on Mutulu Shakur. Remember, I showed that to y'all. If y'all go in the archive, you can find it. But they talk about visiting Mutulu Shakur and saying he's in the Florence, Colorado Supermax. He was. They released him, compassionate release, so to speak. And they talked about the fact that it's the most inhumane place on the planet. And one of the things she said was, you go into a place like that, which is underground. And she said, you think to yourself, she said, I thought to myself, what kind of man or mind, I'm sure it was a man, don't have to, what kind of mind does it take to even design a place like this? You want to talk about a sick society and a sick culture? She said, this is the worst place for a human being in existence. And I wonder, as we see Ghislaine Maxwell enjoying her pet and enjoying her food and enjoying her leisure as she walks around, even as Bozo prepares to try to buy her off or whatever he is whispered into the ear of his little henchmen at the Attorney General's office, henchmen and henchwomen, sending Todd down there with Pam. What do you want? Justice? No, you don't want justice. You want to be let off for your nasty, unspeakable crimes. But winter is coming, my friends, because just as we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation today, Rudolph Giuliani on the run, and then after a true tragedy, he becomes America's mayor. But guess what? He reverted. Why? Because you can only go on so long before that stench breaks through the immediate distraction, even if it takes years, even as we talk about the idea that whatever you thought in that moment was the thing that diverted you, that distracted you, who you are will ultimately bust through all of that, won't it, Bozo? So you can continue to saber rattled in the Caribbean Sea. You can continue to say you're going to take Greenland or attack Canada. It's all desperation. You still stink. You're still sitting there and baking in the sun in Vatican City at the Pope's funeral with everybody trying to get away from you. Why? Because the stench is not going to go away. So you can continue to try to distract, and there are going to be a lot of attempts to distract all through that whole process. But, at the end of the day, it's going to come back. And so as these attorneys were talking about being in this space and being in spaces with people who would abandon all hope if they were allowed to allow themselves just to concede to the formation they find themselves in and to concede their being, but in fact stood tall, stood strong, but stood strong because not only of their strength as human beings, not only because of their experiences, but because of community. Over and over again last night, the point was made. Over and over again yesterday, and I'm sure it's going to continue today, over and over the point. If you know somebody who's behind the wall for whatever reasons, not only political prisoners, but anyone who is behind the wall, do not forget them. Do not leave them. Do not allow them to think they are alone. Because even if you are out here banging on pots and organizing and writing and going to court and pushing legislators and lobbying, if they don't know about it, they might think that they have been abandoned. So call them, write them, go to the Jericho movement, go to that website and see. Write some people, talk with some people, let them know what you are doing on their behalf. Because if they never get out of the space, they must always know that they're not in the space in their moment, at least not in terms of their mind and their spirit. They've got to know they're connected. So it was just very interesting. Then Kangani Akinyela and Baba Kwame Kalamara were talking about and walking through the moments of those protests, the moment when the message comes. And then Mama Nkechi Taifa repeated the message in that moment because she was there when Assata sends that message from somewhere in the world. And then Baba Kwame started putting photographs up, photographs of the posters that were all over the country after, you know, she had was broken out. It says, Assata is welcome here. I thought about all the young people who wear those t-shirts now. Assata is welcome here, to make that statement. I thought about all the people who are fighting the fascist thugs of ICE and doggone Christy Nome and all you people in Bozo trying to distract you as people are coming in and said, you know, no, immigrants are welcome here. I wouldn't even say immigrants. I would say human beings are welcome here. What y'all not going to do is come in with your diminished and dented up humanity and try to abduct people. No, what African people have been there. Assata is welcome here. He's showing the photographs and he's showing all the documents and he's showing all the rallies and he's showing photographs of this as we're talking. And then he shows a photograph of Barack Obama and Eric Holder. And he said, here are the two people who are primarily most responsible for Assata having to go even deeper underground, for not being able to walk around in Cuba, for now having to go into deep protection. Why? Because under that administration is when they doubled the bounty on her head and put even more pressure. And remember, and afterwards we were talking, I said, yeah, remember when Barack and Michelle Obama went down to Cuba? And one of the things on their list was to talk to Raul Castro. This is after Fidel Castro had made transition. Yeah, we want Assata. I'm not mad at Barack Obama because I had no expectations of him. I don't know that man. I shook his hand one time. That's long before he was president of the United States. He was in the Illinois State Senate years ago. I read his book, as I've told you all. And so, you know, we had a groundbreaking for Black theater. So I mean, I don't have any feelings about Barack Obama that way because I know he's a politician. And I know he asked for Assata Shakur. And I know that his administration was the reason why it intensified even more on her so that they couldn't just go. And it was funny to talk about, you know, you get to Cuba and somehow way she knew you were in the country even when you didn't know where she was. And she show up at your place. And of course, because they got the place. Shout out to the Cubans. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. But I'm saying all that to say as a backdrop to this, when we think about how people have convened themselves, we understand that it is our community that allows us to be in the world. And so, you know, it was quite powerful to see photographs of people who are walking around the earth right now, laughing, sitting, talking with Assata Shakur. And in a social structure rendering, they would all be rendered criminals. But guess what? So would Harriet Tubman. And as April said last night, April Albright, says she gave a metaphor about the Red Sea and about Pharaoh and about, you know, people being killed and the Hebrew Israelites getting away. And I don't, that metaphor doesn't resonate with me because I know too much Kemetic history. At the same time, I understand that for a lot of people, and my mama being one of them, who went through the Nile Valley with me, that metaphor resonates. So I don't reject the metaphor because I know underneath that metaphor is a means to an end. That's why it's a metaphor. And so she said, but if Moses ain't the one that does it for you, think of Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman had to wade through that water neck deep. And I said, yeah, that's right. Go ahead, April. Expand that discourse. Expand that dialogue, because that movement and memory is what allows us to gather the strength, not only of real-time community, but of the community of memory, the community of vision, the community that lies at the heart of what Angie Porter is doing with Africana Legal Studies, the community that lies at the heart of the intellectual work and the warrior work of these Black legal titans who grapple and fight every day. And so I'll kind of now wrap up just with a couple of comments. I was watching something, Prof. I don't know if you've seen it. It just came out, this mini series, Death by Lightning. I don't know if you saw it. It's on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yes, yeah. I'm in episode 2. I was thinking about you too because
Yeah.
as this historical, you know, rendering in the wake of, you know, the Civil War, I'm wondering, you know, the accuracy. What are your thoughts on it?
I would just say quickly that, and I was telling students earlier this week, if James Garfield had lived, I don't know that we would be talking about Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant the same way. Chester Arthur is the accidental president anyway. And so when I saw it was coming on, I kind of chuckled because I said, okay, good. Somebody need to talk about Garfield. Garfield's a fascinating figure. You know, Garfield is a person who remember Garfield's the president after Rutherford B. Hayes, after the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, and he defeats Grant in the nomination, and he didn't want the nomination coming out of Ohio. But in terms of his political sensibility, and this is a social structure rendering, he ain't black. When you talk about Frederick Douglass, you talk about Branch Kelso Bruce, you talking about a moment when you're dealing with the question of equal rights, where it's still very much in flux. The 14th Amendment has been passed, 13, 14, and 15, but you've got federal legislation that has to enforce that. And of course, Grant signed the Ku Klux Klan Act, created the Department of Justice. I think had Garfield lived, he had the potential to be one of the most forward-thinking U.S. presidents. And if somebody told me we would be at a very different place in U.S. history had Garfield lived, I would say I would probably be inclined to agree. Now, of course, they're going to take some historic license. They're going to take some, because it's drama. They putting it together with a certain kind of thing. I thought the acting was good. I thought, in terms of
you got Mike Shannon.
Yeah, Mike Shannon's an interesting
Oh
actor.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Bradley Whitford, Nick Offerman. The guy from Succession,
yes,
who's British, but the acting is amazing. And
yeah,
I never thought about Garfield ever,
because he was only there. They don't talk about it.
I know, but you get to see the importance, and even now he got the nomination.
Yes,
and the people can speak in a moment, because it was not set up for him at all. He didn't want it. He was back in. He was like, what? How am I even on the thing?
That's right.
And the people decided.
That's right. Yeah, having lived in Ohio for 5 years and kind of knowing about that, you go to the Garfield house. Yeah, he campaigned from his porch. That's true. That's true. He said, I'm not going. You're right. It's very interesting to see how politics kind of emerges. But I think for Black people, there are lessons there, including the Black doctor who treated him. It's very interesting because there are Black people all in these assassinations. There's a book, I just got my hands on it, on Black people who were around when Lincoln was assassinated and who knew some of the people who were in the conspiracy and what they were talking about. And so there's a whole governance conversation about that. It's similar to Garfield. It's similar to William McKinley. Remember, it was a Black dude that snatched the guy that shot McKinley. I mean, so, and it was a Black guy on the Secret Service detail the day Kennedy was killed. I mean, so it's interesting to think about this in the context of, in fact, the brother who was on the Secret Service detail when Kennedy was killed held until he was a senior elder, shortly before he made transition. The story that I heard Lyndon Johnson in the White House going to the Oval Office where Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy were, and they was arguing, and I'm standing outside on detail, and he asked, and he comes in, who is that Negro? And he's Secret Service. And he goes in, they argue, and then as he came out, the elder said, I heard Lyndon Johnson say, you're going to stop effing with me. You're going to stop effing with me, Mr. President. And so people said, well, was Johnson in the assassination? I don't know what happened. And I'm telling you, I don't believe nothing none of them say, because you're the government. That's number one. So whatever. But my point is, though, that Black people always ear hustling. They was ear hustling during Garfield. So it's just
we just sit there for the fact that Assata Shakur, to this day, we don't know how she got out.
To this day.
And I know people in the room what look, they don't
lawyers. They say, I don't know nothing. I don't know what you're talking about.
But we talk too much today.
Too much.
And there's a desire to want to let people know that you know things.
Yes.
The knowledge itself is the power.
Yes.
I'm just for the future generation. They used to say loose lips sink ships and all. Like we can't hold nothing. Can't keep secret.
Can't keep nothing.
Thank God our ancestors knew how to shut their mouths.
You saw what the sister from New Jersey, the Congresswoman McIver. The judge is Black. The judge, he's in his 40s. He went to Hampton. Jamel Semper. He is trying
That's
to play it straight. He's trying to play by the rules. Joe Biden put him on the bench in 23. He's like, look, I can't dismiss this. I won't dismiss it because you haven't established that, this pushing and shoving, well, they were out of order. You haven't established that you were somehow doing your duties. And I'm thinking, you're a good black man trying to do this thing the right way, and you have yet to figure out. But that's all right. She's going to be vindicated. But the fact you got to go through these loops.
Monica McIver. Let's
Yes.
what's her name? Yeah, who was
Yes.
hemmed up along. I think Ross Baraka was hemmed up at the same time too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Check on folk and
in a prison that's a private prison that was determined. The reason they were out there is because this is illegal. The mayor of Newark, held on, y'all bypassed the city, the state. Guess what? It comes out that it was true. This shouldn't have been there. and then they dropped the charge against him. But again, word warriors, lawyers. Why? Because the prosecutor, this Alina chick, they after her because they said you were illegally appointed, just like the woman in Virginia, and that hasn't been settled. You can't be faint of heart. You got to continue to fight. And just because, okay, we won some elections, well, okay, fine. Then the government reopens. See, no. And the next time you think that it's over because you won a victory, and then the next day somebody else won a victory and you get despondent, just sit for a moment. Just sit for a tiny moment. Don't take long. Just sit for a moment. Just sit for a moment and think about 51 years. Think about Baranza Bowers Jr., a man who did 51 years behind the wall, one breath at a time, and came out playing his flute. So, oh man, we lost. Hey, everybody calm down. So the shutdown is ended. We walked through that all week, all shows, every on series. The reality is that in the United States, the people who live in the United States of America are no stronger or weaker than any other group of people in any other country in any other parts of the history of time. The 8 senators who voted with the white nationalists to reopen the government, they've been able to do that. It's over now. And guess what? A few days later, one of them senators bust his head because he had some lightheadedness, and he went to the hospital because he got health care, don't you, Senator Fetterman? So guess what? If you think it's over, no, you're going to have another bite at the apple. You can retire John Fetterman, a millionaire from Western Pennsylvania who had to go to the doctor. And even if he didn't have insurance on our dime, because we pay our taxes, he got insurance on his own because he's a millionaire. Guess what? Don't be worried about John Fetterman. Get our money back for those elders who need that, for the children who need SNAP and who need health care. You need that. This whole drama is going to start again. And if you think about it, seize those moments when we have a victory and build that momentum. The fairy godmother of HBCUs dropped another $50 million on Bowie State this week, and then dropped more and more millions on Winston-Salem State. Guess what? I don't know why she's doing it. I don't care why she's doing it. Give the money, and y'all be good stewards of the money, because it seems to me that, look, first of all, you give a little money, like $20 million to Winston-Salem State in the year 2000. You come back, drop another 40 on them. That might be seed money too. She got plenty of money. What if she comes back and says, all these HBCUs I gave money to, I've been keeping track of what y'all did with it. And based on what y'all did with it, I'm now going to give you $1 billion. I'm going to give you $400 million. I'm going to give you, because she says she's going to give it all away. So my moment is take that moment and build that momentum. It's a transformational gift. No, you are the transformational gift. It's just that a human being saw that. Don't be waiting on Oprah. Don't be waiting on Robert Smith. Understand that the value in that space is you. And those white nationalists are daring us to think for ourselves. At Texas A&M, they just passed a rule that said if you're dealing with race or gender, you got to get the approval of your campus president before your class can be offered. Really? Well, guess what? It ain't just Texas A&M, the one university. Texas A&M is a system. I think it's 9 schools. One of those schools is Prairie View, and Prairie View got a strong African American Studies program. Remember, that's where Ruth Simmons was. Are they going after the black colleges? Eventually they will. Jim Ryan, the president of the University of Virginia, wrote a 12-page letter. He just released it since I've been down here. I'm reading through the letter like, my God, I got friends at the University of Virginia. One of my best friends and proteges, the great Claudrina Harold, Dr. Claudrina Harold in the history department, who teaches African American studies, a filmmaker, a brilliant sister, came out of Jacksonville, Florida, Temple University graduate, then PhD Notre Dame, and salt of the earth 10 toes down African for the people all day, every day. Got, hey man, what's going on down there? But the former president of the University of Virginia, like, y'all pushed me out. This is absurd. I thought it was a joke. These people are not going to allow you to be on your own terms if you kowtow to them. You got to look at them dead in the eye, or really down at them, because we're greater than they are and we are their parents, and remind them that I'm not the one to fight. You can fight me if you want to. In fact, I'm going to pause there because just thinking about it, I'm excited about going back over here with these elders and with these young people and just sitting and listening. Because, I pulled my shift yesterday. So I get to go over and sit and take notes and just be in community, because it's always been open season on Black folk. But guess what? It's a season for us to be open with each other. It's always open season for us to be open with each other. And so I'm going to go and be open with these elders and young people and age mates like Mauli, so I can learn some more and keep with the fight.
Yeah. I'm excited too, Dr. Carr.
It's exciting, right? People are, why are you always excited? I'm excited because I know how this ends. Come on, Rob.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And attitude is everything, right? Like,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. It's one more thing. If I don't do this, I can't go back over there. A brother came up to me. He didn't tell me who he was. He just gave me a bear hug. And I don't even know what this means. Maybe you will. He said, 297 loves Karen Hunter. Tell her that. Everybody's telling me to tell you hello. I think, is this some kind of code? He said, no, you just tell.
No, I'm sure that's an area code. Let me see.
I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out.
Find out what the 297. Let me see.
I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out, because I know we had 297, but I mean, there are people who don't miss the weeks. There are elders who say it gets them through the week. There are people who listen to you every day. There are people who, and if I hear another person that says my mother or my father or my granddad or my keeps this on loop, and Kichi said, this is my walking. I'm listening. Y'all probably in Kichi listening right now. She goes for her walk every. This is in Kichi Taifa, one of the greatest warrior lawyers of our time. She said, I don't miss Saturday. Y'all my walking music. I walk in, and she done fought the police. I'm like, come on, Kichi.
This has given me greater expanded my vision, because we sew it in. It's yes. All connected, right? So Sirius XM Urban View channel 126, but it's
yes.
In Class With Carr, it's Maroon's Medicine Chest, it's Meta Nature, yes. It's and it's all woven in. It's YouTube, where we started 297 classes ago, started on YouTube. It's now in Nubia, which didn't exist for a year or two after. So it's right. and everybody who says they're Nubian may or may not be actually in Nubia, but we are all Nubians, which is its own thing, which is wild. Wow. That's wild to me. And we're everywhere at the same time. We can keep our mouths closed.
Yes, yes. Keep our mouths. Say less.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very visionary. The elders would appreciate that. Just don't say less. Yeah. As you would say less. Love you.
Love you too.
Hey, I'll see y'all Monday night.
Okay. And office hours for those of you in New York, Dr. Carr, every Monday, 8 p.m. Yes, bye-bye.
See y'all. Bye-bye.